Welcome to the next Face to Face, and I'm very pleased today to have Dr. SOMADODA FIKENI. He's well known as a policy and political analyst, and he's the convener of the Indlamiti South African Scenarios 2030. And if you remember, he was joined at the time at the launch by our president. He's got a lot on his plate at the moment, and Fix, nice to have you with me on this special day. Thank you for finding some time.
Thank you very much, Stuart, and also to the viewers, I would like to wish them a happy Freedom Day. Even under the lockdown conditions, we must still treasure and appreciate what this Freedom Day means.
That's absolutely right. So I guess the big question on everybody's mind is, what has this pandemic done to the political scenario in this country? What's it done to our politics? It's hardly mentioned anymore. So you tell me what's happening behind the scenes.
Thank you very much for that question, because many people tend to focus on the health aspect of this pandemic, and many economists are beginning to project and predict the economic carnage this is going to cause. Yet there is a profoundly important political aspect of what this pandemic has done in the short term and what it is likely to do in the medium to long term. Let's just go back. Before this Black Swan event, which was unexpected and yet now has changed our lives in a profound manner, ANC was a deeply factionalized organization where factions were preparing for the mid-term policy review called the National General Council. And this was going to take place at the end of June and beginning of July. And you were beginning to see many criticizing President Cyril Ramaphosa for being lethargic, for lacking decisiveness, and they were blaming him for a number of things. So his opponents were gaining ground, they were becoming bold, and we were even told that some figures such as Lindiwe Sisulu, Ace Magashule, Batable Dlamini were regrouping. Those who used to support Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma were rallying around this. So the policy conference was going to be the one where Ramaphosa would actually have to defend himself for a number of things, including the poorly performing economy, the downgrading, the unemployment, and also the question of whether he had implemented the ANC conference resolutions well. With this particular pandemic now, it has given Cyril Ramaphosa, in the quietness of the moment, with the opposition parties not being a big factor and the factions not being a big factor, it has given him and his government a very strong arm and space to provide leadership. And it looks like the country is rallying around him. It has demonstrated that he can actually rule, and the support base right across the country seemed to have been quite strong in that sense. So it gave him a very rare opportunity to demonstrate his leadership, and that it's going to strengthen his arm. If he were to succeed in managing the pandemic, and if he were to succeed in the implementation of the stimulus package as well as the social security package, that is going to have political dividends for him for quite some time. On the other side, remember that the opposition Democratic Party was in disarray, hoping that its policy conference, which was to take place in April, would assist in selecting new leadership, but also in repositioning the party in time for next year's local government elections. That has not taken place, and the opposition party seemed to have been eclipsed by these events and has not provided any particular alternative at this particular moment. So that in itself, I think, is weakening, the party.
There's been a lot of talk about the situation with all the funds, all the massive amounts of money which are going to be dispersed. And I know one of your big concerns, and you were discussing it with our colleague Bongani Bingwa the other day, is how do we know the money is going to get where it's intended?
That's a very important question. With the stimulus package, we know that there are three major challenges that the government faces. The one, the state capacity to implement programs, even during the best of years, has not been a great one. So the state will have to supplement its ability to implement the programs and even get its social partners from the private sector, from the NGOs, in order to implement those programs speedily. But at the same time, remember that in the absence of complex bureaucratic processes, during the World Cup, when we had a special dispensation, we seem to have seen a speedier implementation of programs. Maybe we may have such a situation here. If that becomes the case, then it will be positive for government. But if they fail to do so, then it will be a big problem which will turn the positive into negative. The second problem is the one.
Go on.
The second problem is the one of corruption. We do know that corruption has been quite rampant, and especially in the public sector. So if these funds happen to find their way into the wrong hands of the politically connected, again, it could turn the positive mood into a negative one, especially at this time of the disaster. You remember that Nelson Mandela's own funeral was not spared by those who wanted to loot public resources. So that in itself, I think, becomes a huge worry. Again, government would have to devise mechanism of special tribunals so that people can begin to see that people are prosecuted within the shortest of time, even if they go for the big guns, should they try to dip their hands in this.
You know, you are a lot more connected than any of us. What are your spies? What are they telling you about what's being done to try and avoid the obvious looting and theft that we've seen, you know, part of our scenario for so long now?
For now, I do think that the main thing is they are trying to talk to each other to say this will be a huge setback, especially when the government is facing local government elections. And when the opposition parties are so vigilant, trying to latch into any of the weaknesses. That's the first packaging of the message. But at the same time, they are trying to depoliticize the implementation process by having professional teams, which include people who are not from within government, in order to protect themselves. The other day, I was talking to the Auditor General.
Apologies, carry on.
Yes. The other day, I was talking to the Auditor General. They are also looking at mechanisms of trying to make sure that they play their role of monitoring and also of the early warning system should anything happen to these particular resources. People right now, even the public, is so wide awake because they've realized that the previous looting, which went on unabated, led to them having to pay from their pockets the taxes, the levies of all kind. So here you also have public vigilance at this particular moment. So it's going to be one of the critical areas they focus on. They are also looking at special purpose vehicle to deal with corruption.
What should we be watching out for? What should we be thinking? Because we're all pretty much in a state of what next?
I do think that the current pandemic and interventions thereof are going to be with us at least until the end of the year, because winter, we expect a surge during the winter, and we can expect not only South Africa, but other countries trying to wrestle with the situation. So we will still have some of the restrictions, but we can expect the postponement of the ANC policy conference either into the end of the year or into early next year. We may even have, if the situation becomes severe, the postponement of local government elections to the latter part of next year instead of early next year. So those are some of the very, very important signals that we should be looking for. But it's not only South Africa, but the geopolitics of the world are likely to change in a dramatic fashion. One, we can expect the China-USA new Cold War to be as vicious as anything, from technology such as 5G to intellectual property issues up to the trade issues. And the second one, the European Union, we can expect it to be severely weakened or even collapse if it cannot handle the issue of emergency assistance of the southern states like Italy, which were already, grappling with the challenges even before the pandemic came into being. The Brexit, of course, is still a new factor that is still not factored into all this. Even BRICS itself, when you see Brazil pulling in a different direction from those of China, when you see other powers like India wanting to occupy the space that China will have lost. So all that tells us that we're going to have a busy world, which may look like the post-Second World War world, where institutional arrangement, new policies will come into being to regulate how things are done politically, economically, commercially in the world.
Okay, our time is almost up and you've given me more than I expected, and I'm delighted that you were able to. If you're sitting with your grandchildren on your knees, what are you going to say to them that gives them some kind of positive message, like a granddad would?
I would simply say never allow any crisis go to waste. When you have crises of this nature, it's time to restructure. It's time to do things which otherwise we could not have done in order to deal with unemployment in a creative way, to deal with us making a leapfrog into the fourth industrial revolution in terms of our infrastructure for communication, for example, allocating the spectrum to the mobile and the other, entities of that nature. It's time for e-commerce, e-learning, e-governance to take a leap forward such that we fully are in the 21st century. But the issue of also establishing and recovering our local manufacturing base for strategic materials such as the masks. So you are more likely going to see many countries rethinking the whole thing of outsourcing some of the basic functions such as food security, such as, the textile industry for the masks, the ventilators, the manufacturing of drugs during this period, because pandemics of this nature are more likely to be with us if you look at their frequency from SARS to the one we have.
Dr. SOMADODA FIKENI, Fix, thank you so much. We'll catch up again soon, and off you go to your next briefing. I wish you well and stay safe.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day and have a wonderful week ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.